Time to drop the really big bomb, Elon Musk says. Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day. Anyone with a brain already knew this. I've been saying this for months, and most of you guys, I would hope, are as well. However, wow. At this point, anyone with a brain, this is war between these two giant grifter criminals. And when you look at these guys, I mean, you got these rich elites, and they come in and they're stealing taxpayer money. They're while their stooges are saying they're going to save them money, they're going to save America, all this stuff. They're destroying the Constitution. And I know Trump mostly, but it's not like as Trump is abusing the Constitution and immigrants and due process and everything, that Elon was coming out in favor of that, right? Instead of Elon standing up and saying, whoa, it's not cool what we're doing to people, now they're going to have a pissing contest of how bad they actually are. All right? I'm glad you guys can hear. And this is a reality show. And we must be coming to the final episodes. You guys, this has to be some sort of like reality show. I sometimes I hear these theories where they're all like, hey, here's the evidence that something went wrong, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, that we slipped universes or something like that. Nothing's original anymore. Nothing's getting better. Everything just keeps kind of cascading and is on repeat. And I try to have faith every day, but you got to wonder sometimes, because the level of stupidity of the leaders, of the people that, the level of ignorant stupidity of the people that have been simping for Donald Trump, and still are a lot of them. Some people still aren't waking up. But it's wild. It's really wild. And so this whole thing of like, maybe we are in a simulation, because this seems like the dumbest reality show ever. It's like a reality show within a reality show. So you can go to Elon Musk's Twitter and him and Trump are at it, right? And he, it all fell apart when Elon turned against Trump's bill, his big beautiful bill. Which, of course, again, anybody that has any concept of economics and spending, these omnibus bills, this idea that you can throw a whole bunch of crap into a bill and, like, you hear these terms like they stuffed something into the bill at the last minute. It's completely unconstitutional. A bill in Congress can be for one thing. That was the intent of the process. The idea that you can have this bill that's thousands of pages long, these omnibus bills and things like that, these massive budget bills, and then you sneak things in, or you have like defense spending bills and you sneak another bill in and you tack it onto the end, and then they have to vote for all of it. It's a scam, you guys. This is not law. The courts are not law. We're just, at this point, the government is in late stage anarchy. And who knows what comes next? I mean, yeah, this is like, they could announce a WWE match between Elon and Trump tomorrow. Would anyone be surprised? I honestly wouldn't. I wouldn't. You cannot make this crap up. But let's not get stuck on it. What other crap is going on? You know what? Let's go. Let's do what we're gonna do. Let's work on our new format, where we're just gonna talk about absolutely anything we want to. And I'm gonna talk about absolutely anything. And this is, of course, front page of Drudge and all that good stuff. But what we're doing from now on the show is I'm just gonna talk about whatever. Beautiful breakup. Trump-Elon romance explodes into insults and threats. I mean, this is laughable, but when you look at what Trump has been doing, and I don't want to make this like a left versus right thing, right? You look at the abuse that's been going on in our country under Trump, Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, the FBI, the CIA. Did you guys watch? I shared a video. I don't know if you guys follow my Facebook personal feed, but you can. I have endless friend requests that I never get through, and there's a limit, right? But you can follow me over here. And so I actually make a fairly regular post, and you can also follow Gavin Seim for Liberty, which is, so this is my personal profile's here. And then if you go to Call Me Gav, right here, this is my page. And I post occasionally on this page as well. But, with the Facebook algorithms, I don't put a lot of energy into Facebook. I just post things now and then because I want to. When you go through this, and a lot of my trolls are on here, but a lot of you actual friends are on here as well. And no, by the way, the president has zero authority to enact travel bans. I posted this yesterday. This is the kind of stuff I post all the time on my page. And so if you want to know like what I think about something that's going on, it's probably on my page, even if I'm not on the show. You have to, the abuses that are happening. There was a video I shared, and you guys have to go watch this. Let me see if I can find the video that I just shared a couple days ago. About why is it so hard? Have you noticed that it's super hard to find anything when you need it? It's like you see the post over and over again, and then you're like, hey, I need to go find this post. And it's never, ever there. And it's like Facebook hears you coming and goes and hides. And if you follow my Facebook personal page, you'll often come across, the comments and things that I leave on people like the Grant County Sheriff's page, and just like the good stuff. And I share those little tidbits there. In fact, they posted this the other day. Don't worry, I'm coming back to our point here. Did they block me? It's not even. Oh, here it is. This is the Grant County Sheriff's page. My home county, and they post this domestic abuse, people who are jealous and insecure. They talk down to people. They abuse them, right? And I said, wow, finally a post about how police treat their wives. No one beats wives like cops do. Which of course pissed the locals that don't like me off, and then my friends all started getting in there. And yes, this is actually a fact. This isn't just me making up crap. There's been studies on this. All right, but I'm coming back to your comments, and I'm coming back to this post because we were talking about Trump and Elon and the abuse, and it was about. For heaven's sake. Puerto Rico. I don't know if you guys know the deal with Puerto Rico, but let me there's a really good video here that kind of covers the history, because the U.S. says that, we're always helping people, we're always, freeing people, and we have these states like Puerto Rico that are not actually states. We don't give them full rights. It's complete BS. What we really did is we stole their countries from them. We invaded their countries. And then we say, they're brothers with us, right? But Johnny Harris did a pretty wildly good video on Puerto Rico that really just shows how far back, and I'll drop it in the comments here right now. It just shows how far back this abuse has gone. And so you can go over and watch that video when this is done, because it's very educational of how the U.S. uses nice words to actually steal people's countries and murder them and call them terrorists, basically. And this is not new. This is not new 9/11 stuff. This has been going on for a long time. It's a pretty sick watch, and I don't mean that as in, it's a good, well-done video, but it's sick when you see, just how nuts, how psychopathic and what a criminal state the U.S. is, that we're actually, and this is something people really have a hard time accepting, that we're the terrorists. The USA is the terrorist state. And people don't want to admit that. So yeah, just let's come back to your comments here. We got Musk, we got just U.S. constantly abusing the rule of law. Trump said he would end the Russian-Ukraine war day one. Matthew Lesko is still showing people how to get any money you can take back from the government that they've stolen from you, fine. I do occasionally stumble on those Matthew Lesko videos, and I remember those from like ads, from like videotapes of movies we recorded that we watched when we were kids in the 90s, and he was on there in that crazy outfit. Washington State is now the highest tax state in America, United States. Highest tax state in the United States. I can believe that. I can believe that, but there's still states that I would I would still rather live in Washington than Texas. It's like the biggest poser state in the entire union. If you can call this a union, I mean, come on. I'm going to move to North Korea. Just to be clear, I don't think, people always say like, oh, move to North Korea or something like that, but it's not good either. I mean, there's a reason people like Trump like Kim Jong. These are both psychopathic dictators. And when you see these people running and palling around, like the president of Russia palling around with Kim Jong, I think, wasn't there a recent thing about that? The Chinese are always tight with North Korea. These are the psychopaths of the world. Most of these politicians are crazy asses, but some of them abuse the privilege of being psychopaths. Let's just go back. Drudge is kind of full of a lot of BS, but it is a good way to get a finger on like what's actually going on. So let's just everybody's talking about now like, wow. It's all upside down, you guys. It's like Survivor. I keep seeing this thing here. This is one to talk about. We should talk about this. I keep seeing these feds like searching phones at the border. Okay. Now, I want to put you. Look, I've talked about this immigration stuff so much. All immigration restrictions are illegal. They're crimes against the Constitution and against humanity. Number one. In the United States, all immigration restrictions are completely unconstitutional. I have validated that with history. I'll put a link in the comments as well here. But if you go, I've spent years compiling information and historical fact on this. And just this year, I finally released the article after literally like 5 years of compiling this. And not an article of it's not an opinion piece. It's the historical facts. It's the law. And all people can do when they go to this article is call me names, because there's no refuting this with facts. If you believe in this hype of like we should restrict immigration, you need permission from government to travel. And so what you're seeing is people are running in. What's happening now is people are running into the brick wall that inevitably comes with this kind of crap, okay? People are running into the brick wall that inevitably comes with this kind of crap. And we're seeing things like feds, people are outraged because, the feds are searching their phones. People are outraged because police are kicking in their doors without a warrant. And so you have the feds as you enter the border who are violating, without warrants, your personal privacy. And I've seen this being talked about now for months, honestly. But these whole travel bans, not just banning people from certain countries from coming to the U.S., but banning you from going to those countries. The idea of electing a president was never that he got to dictate to you, the individual, where you go. That's literally the opposite of what all this was about. It's the absolute opposite. The Constitution doesn't give you any rights, by the way. You already have them. And people say, oh, the Constitution allows for immigration restriction. First, no. Second, if it did, it's crap. And no one needs to obey it. A constitution is only there to uphold your rights. If the government changes the Constitution to violate your rights, it's no longer law. And this is something that people really, really don't seem to get. And so as I watch people like coming into the US, and they're going through their phones and their social media. Guys, I left the country. I left everything behind over a county court demanding that I give over the password to my phone, or they were going to put me in jail. That's how important this is. Do you understand that? You can go watch the videos, right? And sure, I've been an activist for years. I was the founder, they say, of auditing, even though I never called it that. So there were people who were like, they're going to come for you, Gavin. But that was the turning point. I left my country, my house. I loaded up in a trailer and left and became a refugee because these assholes thought they had a right to look at my private information and to snoop around in my phone. Hell no. Not okay. Not legal. Not constitutional. And yes, B. Hendricks, the Constitution recognizes rights you were born with, which is something that most people don't seem to understand, but also, if a constitution, right, because most countries have a constitution, and then what they usually do is the constitution starts out pretty good, and then the corrupt politicians, they do this in Mexico to a degree, because it's easier to change the constitution. So the Constitution of Mexico does have a lot of good things in it, sometimes stronger than the US Constitution. But it's huge, because they just keep amending and amending and amending to try and give themselves more power. I don't know. I've been a constitutional teacher for a long time. When you look across the world, constitutions aren't working that well. Now, I know the Constitution was never meant to kick ass for you. You had to actually have a pair of balls and not be a numbnuts that believed everything the government said. So it's not, people like to say, oh, the Constitution is useless, it didn't work. Well, we're useless because our society didn't defend our rights. But you do have to wonder if we should stop calling these constitutions and stop letting governments have them. If there should just be declarations of rights, period. Non-ratifiable by your government, at least without some extreme, like you can add to them, but these are the basic rights. I guess that is just a constitution, right? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud because people are idiots. But that's the problem. It doesn't matter like how you form your government, and don't say like, oh, I want no government. That'll never happen. If you and 1,000 people move to a barren island somewhere, the next thing you do is say, oh, Frank stole from me. How do we arbitrate that? It's like, well, all right, we got to get together and look at the evidence. You just made a government. A government will always come. It's just like, you can call it another name. But anarchy in the sense of no government doesn't exist. Anarchy in its like sense of like chaotic sense that people, the mainstream thinks of it, is more what our current governments are. That's how most governments act, is in a state of anarchy. And I know the anarchist people say, no, that's not anarchy. Anarchy is without rulers. Okay, fine. But there will always be, even if you have a small community and you have a community council or a community court for when crimes are committed, when assaults are committed, when thefts are committed, that's a government. There's literally no way to not have a government of some kind. So then we say, okay, well, we're going to write it down. We're going to ratify it. We're going to make it codified law, things like rights. Again, if you're not vigilant, they abuse that. What it always comes down to is people not loving their neighbor and caring about justice is always what breaks everything. So, you could say it's a republic. You could say all these different things. But in reality, if we're talking about the philosophy of it, there's always going to be a government, whether you like it or not. But I digress. Because everybody's asleep at this time of night, and I just went live for pure nonsense. And I'm leaving soon if I don't get super chats anyhow, because I'm sick of having no tacos. I'm a poor Mexican, you guys. People want me to do this stuff, but there's no tacos coming, But I do want to thank my channel backers here. And yeah, sometimes I do think it was smart to leave. There's sometimes when it's like, wow, I miss paragliding on the point of the mountain in Utah. Those 2 police informants who didn't like you filming them, they told you to wipe your ass with the Constitution. They did. And that's really how people think. But that's how the so-called constitutionalists and patriots even think about it. If you look at how they're totally fine with the Constitution trampled when it comes to immigrants who have every right to be there without permission of the government. The idea that you need permission to immigrate is ludicrous and illegal. I've proved it over and over again. Go read the article if you don't believe me. Listen to my videos if you don't believe me. There's not a shred of evidence that gives the government power over that. There's absolutely zero authority over that. But they're fine with it. And then when they abuse the 4th, they abuse the 5th, they abuse the 6th. They abuse the First Amendment, right? But then when they come and abuse that at Uncle Bob's house, he's outraged that the Constitution will be violated. It's like, you were just supporting that for that brown guy over there because he didn't have a paper giving him permission to live from a corrupt government. You idiot, asshole, ignorant schmuck. So yeah, it's pretty messed up. It's pretty messed up. But people have to say no, you guys. If you don't say no, they'll just keep doing more. Appreciate it, Island Rose. But listen, Constitution ain't worth the hemp it was written on. I mean, yeah, but that's a cop-out. I get that, but it's a cop-out. It was never meant to be. A document of rights, as long as there's been writing, is only an affirmation. It's only there to remind you and be consistent so people can't twist it. If you don't have the balls to stand up for it, it isn't worth the paper it's written on, but neither is any other law. So the people that have the balls to stand up for their laws are the ones who make the bad laws that are raping and violating and stealing you. The corporations, the government politicians, the police, they have the balls because there's enough of them. They're still cowards. There's just enough of them and they'll shoot you. If you don't obey, they'll kill you. If you don't obey. That's the reality. And a grand jury won't indict them because they decide who's on the grand jury, right? They've loaded the bases. You know? Appreciate it, Island. So, yeah, whatever. That's where we're at. That's where we're at. Listen. This is what we do on this show. And then sometimes I do these breakout videos and put them. It's not like my videos go viral anymore. Like, people want to see me fighting with cops. And you look at guys that saw the kind of early activism that I did, like James Freeman, and then took it up and did something more with it. And now you got James Freeman. I was talking to James recently and working with him on some stuff for these documentary videos he's doing, because I think they're a great idea, where he's going to these communities where people are getting railroaded, and he's kind of mixing activism with an actual documentary. If you haven't seen some of his recent stuff, it's pretty cool. Like the one in, I think, Bisbee, Arizona. I don't have a link right this second, but go check that out. Somebody drop a link to that recent James Freeman video where he's in Bisbee. And so he's doing interviews and stuff, but he's mixing those with body cams. It's real journalism. This is what journalism is supposed to look like, and I've been saying it for years. And I did a little bit of that, but I didn't like go out every day and just go do things. I still was trying to like make a living. It wasn't like I made a living on this. And so like there's a lot of auditors that are, you know, standing up to the police, but a lot of it is just, it's gotten to the point where some of these auditors are just doing sensational, ridiculous things. I've told you guys a lot of times when you're dealing with activism, stay calm. Because the ignorant, the people that don't understand this stuff, they'll see the highest aggressor as the villain. If you can stay calm and show the police as the aggressors they are, it'll start to open eyes. Very slowly, but it will. But if your main goal is not justice, but just views, and you're just going out trolling and like being vulgar to get a rise out of them, I'm not saying you should never like, you know, I think James does it fairly balanced, where he'll like insult these people and get a rise out of them, but it's not the whole video. There's a story there. And so as you got all these people, right, you got immigrants being deported to death camps without due process. You got the Eric Brandts and the Schaefer Coxes and the Jeff Winehouses. Jeff's still sitting in prison. What is it, 12 years later now? And the cops shot him. He literally did nothing. If you guys don't know about Jeff Winehouse, you need to go look it up. You should know this stuff, but you probably do if you follow this channel. Somebody can drop a link to that as well. I need you guys as my assistants to drop links when I mention this stuff, because I don't have 4 hands. I've thought of training my feet so I can be like over here, but then I was like, no one would really want to see me like this, like for the whole video, right? So I just ruled that out purely for pure aesthetic reasons, you know, because I have to be like handsome, collected. It's what we do on this show. But yeah. What else? I was working on this new video. You guys,
Eso por la luz. Y sí.
Yo sé que mi español suena bien tanto, pero nadie va a...
What is going on?
Eso.
Oh, there it is. Why did that start playing? That's whack. But that is what that's what I was doing on day job today, is working on some promos for photo sessions. If you guys, for those
Soy un maestro de
activist,
fotografía,
a talk
tengo
show
más
host.
de 20 años de experiencia.
So look, yeah, I speak Spanish. How about that? I speak Spanish, I take photos, I fight with cops. I'm a political philosopher. Am I good at any of those things? Yes. Some of them. Some of them. But yeah, I've been doing all kinds of stuff down here, right? Consulting for quality control, for cafes, making products. Yes. So the thing is, they're gonna keep doing the same thing, right? They're gonna keep pulling the same crap. Let's look at what else is going on in the news. Hang on, let me get rid of the junk. But yeah, as an activist, stay calm. It doesn't mean you never push, but learn to stay calm. And I think this is true in all areas of life, especially you men. You know, we talk about theology and religion and Bibles and all this stuff, but if you don't know how to stay calm and care about people, you never really find your purpose. If you're always just thrown around by, you know, what your girlfriend's doing this week, what your wife is saying, being stressed at work, and this is hard stuff to overcome. As you know, being the man is tough, and this is something we see a lot of too. Is like men being relegated to crap in today's society. But it's not just that. They're even trying to take away womanhood with all this trans garbage and all this stuff going on. You know, sure, people can live the way they want, but they're trying to take away people's purpose and their identity. Because when someone doesn't have a purpose, they fight, they're distracted, they're not motivated, they're depressed. None of this is an accident. When you take away people's purpose, and so it's not, they've been trying to degrade the man for a long time and make the man not a man. The woman should tell the man what to do. Bullcrap. The woman, in general, a woman does not have the stability to deal with things and the strength to deal with things that a man does. It doesn't mean she can't go off and do her own thing. I'm not saying that men get to force women to do anything. And the men are different from the women too. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to take that away from both, right? They're trying to take everybody and put them in a blender. And it breaks them. The men, and I've been seeing this more and more, I have to fight it myself. Society is constantly trying to break the male spirit. Because the male spirit is ultimately what resists them. Now, don't get me wrong. I could talk about Kelly Stewart and all the times I went out and did activism with her. The female spirit oftentimes is necessary. The women often get up first and kick the men in the balls to get them off the couch and get them fighting. Right? So it's not a one-way street. That's why they want to take it all away. On the one hand, they say, well, men can't do that. Men can't be like that. Men are just machos. Men are just fat chauvinists. All this stuff that they've been saying for years, ever since I was young, and even more and more. And they've now extended it to but men could be women. Women don't get to have that. Men can also decide they're women. I mean, so wait a minute, what? I thought you were defending women's rights, and now you're taking away the identity of the women too? It's whack. TSG, good to see you. I have seen some of those George Carlin videos. Good stuff. You can't take away people's purpose. All right, you can't take away people's purpose. The depression, the suicide. It's not, I know it's not just the men, but men are supposed to be driving and going and building and creating and defending. That's their purpose. That's how we work. It's how we're wired, right? Doesn't mean women don't have any part of that or they never do that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I see this a lot, and I see it in the young men, and I see the way they're being neutralized through the TikToks and the media and the way that men are portrayed as, the only thing they're capable of doing is chasing ass and looking for sex. I'm not saying that men can't be men. I'm not saying that men should be scolded because a woman's running around with her tits hanging out of a low-cut top, and the men are like, wow, that's nice. No, that's not wrong either, guys. And so on the one hand, you have the super conservative man's man that men can't even look at anything, and they just have to have you guys realized that there's an element of crushing the spirit of the men within these conservative churches? The message in a lot of the religious outlets, particularly in U.S. Christianity, that claims to be conservative is actually crush the spirit of the young man in a way of making it out branding it as honorable purity. But really they have to submit to please the woman in the way the system has been set up and do what they're told. You see this a lot. Well, I'm not even going to name churches. It's in all of them, and it is. So in a weird way, while the far left is trying to emasculate the men, in a weird sort of macho way, I see that in the conservative right in the church too, where the men are supposed to be oh, well, I love my wife, and I always bring her flowers after I go out chopping wood in the afternoon, and I would just do anything because Jesus told me to never argue with her because she's a precious ruby. And so there's this emasculation coming from all sides. And what it leads to is, as we age, both men and women, you see this in society. We're not productive. We're not fulfilling our purpose. We're not at it. We're neutral. We're neutered. And that the result of that is in depression. Suicide. Just families, falling apart. The men just giving up. When you look, hang on, if you see these things, like the pharmacy and what they're promoting, you look at these major drug addictions and these drugs that are killing people, right? You look at things like what they're created by pharmacies, right? So the government is creating these pharmaceutical drugs to make billions of dollars that are not natural, causing addictions and death and all this stuff. And then the fallout of that in society, they turn around and say, no, we need more rules. We need more drug war. We need more laws. But they did it. They created it. These drug epidemics. If you go back to things like marijuana, things like, let's talk about, if you guys looked into psilocybin. Have you guys looked into psilocybin? I mean, it's wild. It's wild. And psilocybin is shrooms. Obviously, there's different chemicals in mushrooms and psychedelic mushrooms. But I've been studying herbs for over a decade now, but mostly just, the normal, psychedelic herbs. And I know a lot about healing herbs, antibiotic herbs. I mean, I could do a whole channel just dedicated to that, but no one would watch it. No one cares about actually healing themselves. They just want a pill for it. No one wants to hear the science of this stuff, really. I don't think. Some people do. But we've been so brainwashed. You look into things like psilocybin. The problem I've always had with things like marijuana and shrooms and stuff like that, obviously being raised conservative, those were bad, right? I mean, we were raised in the 90s. Stay off drugs. They're the devil. I don't even know if I want to call those drugs the truly natural things that are natural medicine that God created. Now, I also don't love that most of the time marijuana and shrooms and all this stuff are mostly promoted just because people want to trip, right? Because we kind of just want to escape. And I feel like to a lot of degree, it's because we're not on our purpose. But depression. We've all seen the results of these antidepressants that people take. I mean, they're destroying families. They're destroying societies. Appreciate it, A. Daniels. Shout out to Washington. Washington may be crackpots, but at least you can get marijuana there. And this is a healing herb. Depression, when you start looking into why, okay, even in Mexico, if you take I don't even know all the names of all the mushrooms, but if you take the common mushroom that psilocybin comes from, not the red cap version that they tend to show in cartoons, but just the normal one. In fact, let's look it up, because that's what we do here, right? Psilocybin. We have technology. So let's look at the psilocybin. And so if you take a psilocybin mushroom, and we're talking like these, right? These little mushrooms. These are hallucinogenic mushrooms. Now, there's lots of hallucinogenic plants and artificial things, but these are some of the most natural in a lot of the ancient, like Mexican rituals and also like culture, which is all over the country. Do you know that when the Spanish invaded Mexico, they came here and they were the people in Mexico were doing psilocybin. They were taking mushrooms, and this is how they connected to God. It was the way that it was looked at. So what Spain did, right? Christians, Catholic Church, what the good Christians did is they made doing that a capital offense. They still did it in secret. And even now, you can't, even though that Spain is no longer here and they had a revolution, what they should have done is say, we're reversing everything they did. It's certainly not a capital offense. Lots of people have mushrooms down here, but you can't go into the store and buy them. Psilocybin. Yeah, it's late. I said this is a late night show. So, psilocybin, they've done these tests, and you know people take these antidepressants. The side effects are suicide, depression. People, do you think it's an accident that the rise of antidepressants, of like young men in school shootings, that started, the first big school shooting was Moses Lake, Washington, Barry Lukitis, right? That was 20 minutes away from me, right? I know people that were in the school at the time. Do you think the connection between them peddling ADHD drugs and antidepressants on all these kids, and suddenly all this just random violence, is a coincidence? Antidepressants do not fix depression. They're a scam, and the government is getting the chaos they want out of it, and the pharmacies are getting the money they want out of it. They did a test, and you can look this up. You can verify me on this. And I want to say the numbers. I don't know if I can get it up in real time while I'm talking, but I think they did a test where they did 4 or 5 grams is like a large dose of the mushroom. I'm not talking about pure psilocybin. I can't pronounce anything tonight. I speak various languages and they get all mixed up in my head. So when you're taking a natural herb, obviously there's various active chemicals in it, but there tends to be a dominant active chemical that it's known for, the psilocybin, in this case. And so I think the actual content of psilocybin in 4 grams of this mushroom is in the milligrams. But this will give you a trip, as we say. I've never done this, by the way. I know you guys aren't going to believe me, but like I researched this stuff, and I'm not against it, but I also like my head on straight, and I'm not just like, oh, I want to go get high. But I think that there's a time to use this stuff, and what basically, as I'm looking at this stuff, it resets your brain. So they take people that have depression, and you got people that have been on these pills for years, just the slaves of the pharmacies. You think it's an accident they want to hide this, guys, and make it illegal? It's like it reboots their brain. So people take a dose of psilocybin, and the depression is just, the imbalance in their brain is just poof. Because apparently what it does, what mushrooms do, there's something they call the default mode network in the way our brains work. And this could go so deep as we get into time that isn't really real, the fact of how our souls work and what our brains actually are. This goes so wild in terms of like how the universe is actually working, the quantum field. And I do believe that God created it, but I don't think things work at all like we're preaching in the churches either. So psilocybin kills anxiety, kills depression. It basically disconnects your default mode network. The default mode network is your sense of ego and identity, is my basic understanding of how to describe it. So it is, on a day-to-day basis and surviving, right, you need to have your identity, your purpose, who you are. So this is like the framework that wraps around the consciousness of your brain and the parts that are subconscious that you don't understand how to control. And it turns it off for a little while, for a few hours, right? They did clinical testing, and even in the clinical test, on something like 70% of the patients that were dealing with depression, it eliminated it for like months to a year, a single dose. Do you think that governments and pharmaceutical companies have a reason to make sure that's not what people are using? Do you think they would go above using religion and the church, Christianity, to make that evil when they're actually peddling evil? Now, that doesn't even get into the way, what fascinates me when you get into things like psilocybin. And sure, I'm not saying like go out and like go have a psychedelic trip every night, guys. But you can microdose this stuff too. There's a lot of people, and there's people that microdose acid and things like that. I think staying close to the way that God created things is much better than these synthetic things. And yes, I think, Carl, that is to be fair, I've never done this, but I study a lot. It allows you to escape the time event matrix and unlock self-imposed limitations. Well, I mean, and that's kind of what the default mode network is. Everything that we perceive in the world, and time, and our stress, and our anxiety, in a way it is self-imposed. I mean, yes, these physical bodies have to eat and function. There is a certain reality that we live in. But at the same time, the more you study, the more you realize the universe God created is not at all the way it's being presented to us. Have you ever wondered, like, if you study quantum physics, now we're getting into science. It blows my mind when you get into high-level science how much it actually agrees with, like, fundamental principles of creation that we teach in churches. But then we manipulate and mix those up and make things heresy so we can control people. When you, appreciate it, man. When you have, the entire universe is built of quantum particles, okay? It's essentially made of light and photons and quantum particles. So you think about this and you start looking into how those quantum particles move, what directs them, all this stuff. And it's a pretty wild trip, and without any drugs. You can start, if you start digging into this and studying it, you do meditation, prayer, things like that, it's really all the same, I think. You start, when you dig into the people doing this, they're like, even people that are not religious, they're like, the quantum universe is all made of these particles, and it's essentially the essence of love. And I know it sounds really hippy-dippy, but if you go out, I can go out every night in 5 minutes and just stand there and try to let go of the stress, have some faith, have some peace, and actually say, okay, what I'm feeling right here, right now, this is a way bigger picture. Because here I am, this little speck in the quantum universe. And I'm going to care about people, and I'm going to forgive people. And I'm going to do the best I can, even though I'm a screw up. And you can go out and focus on that, slow your breathing down to 1 or 2 breaths a minute, and actually kind of pull yourself out of this and put yourself in kind of, to the best that you're able, in no space, no time, nothing. And you can feel it. You might not the first time. Do you know sometimes, I'll give you another example. Do you ever sometimes get in the zone when you're listening to a song or something hits you the right way and you kind of get this tingling through your whole body? What I always found that really fascinating, where you have like a spiritual moment or something like that, and it's just kind of like all your muscles just kind of relax and everything. You kind of feel this tingling feel. No drugs, no shrooms, no nothing involved here, right? And you're just like, something's unlocking here. Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. What I realize is you can repeat that. So you can go in and start to remind your subconscious that this time, this place, like you're doing your thing, but here's the universe up here, and you're this little speck. And sometimes it's almost like you can look down on yourself. Again, no drugs, no marijuana, no high. Just you focusing on realizing that you're part of this massive interconnected field where all these particles are interconnecting, even though you're a physical being. you can take triggers. You can get yourself into a low brain frequency where you're kind of on the edge of sleep. And you can get into this kind of meditative state. If you can get in, I'll come to something else in a minute. I know we're on a weird roll here tonight, but it's late night and you don't want to miss this one, okay? I'm not just making crap up, because none of the stuff I'm describing did I do through some kind of a hallucinogenic vision or being on weed or anything like that. This is just all like studying how we work, how God created the universe, and the physics of the quantum universe, and trying to say, okay, because I've been able to, for a long time, to like, you know, kind of feel people, you know, sense not just body language, but you can almost feel emotion radiating from them if you start caring. And I think the more you care about people, the more you start to become sensitized to this, like an antenna. And I don't usually talk about this stuff because people say it's crackpottery. And it does. I know the first time you hear it, it sounds like, oh, this guy's just a wacko hippie marijuana head. No, I'm not. I'm really not. I never have been. When you are in that state, so you can actually get triggers to where when you're in this low frequency state, you can say, okay, when I do, when I press my hands together like this, it's going to remind my brain that I'm connected to this quantum field. My muscles are going to relax, and I'm just kind of absorb a little bit of the universe and feel that kind of where your shoulders relax. And it sounds dumb, right? Like touching your hands together this isn't Kung Fu Panda, right? But you actually are reminding, when you're in this low frequency state, you're reminding your subconscious brain that when you do this, it's a trigger. And you can also do it by meditation, by breathing, praying, being spiritual, talking to God. I get that. And I'll do this. I'll do these little triggers when I'm feeling myself stressful. It doesn't mean it doesn't come back in 10 minutes because I'm consumed with what I have to do and fix today when everything's in chaos. But what it does do is you start to realize that there's something way bigger going on than obviously the movies tell you, but even what they're teaching us in churches and the way they're manipulating the Bible for money and power, just like the politicians manipulate the laws and the Constitution for money and power. All points in space-time are connected. And this sounds like wacko stuff until you start to dig into it, and the more that comes out, it's scientifically validated. You know, and so you have, you know, the super conservative Christian like, oh, you're just talking heresy. This is just stuff to get away from God. This is the stuff God created. The quantum universe, we may not all have it right, but it's there. Quantum computers exist right now. And they're basically unexplainable. This stuff's out there. It's not taking away from God's creation of the universe to say we're manipulating God's word and religion and everything just for control and power and to take away people's connection with God. So it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy, and we could talk all night about it. But I know for the most part, when I start talking about this, I lose most people. This isn't activism, right? But there's something really wild going on, guys. We need to start looking into it. All right, it's so late. Appreciate you guys being here. And yeah, I mean, look, I don't know a lot about trips. I know there's bad trips. I have a bag, am I allowed to say that? Of holy basil. What do they call it? Salvinium. Salvia. Salvia is the short word. I forget the Latin name. So it's not basil, it's salvia. I have a bag of basil, and I bought it just off like Mercado Libre down here. And salvia, now salvia is also a potent hallucinogenic herb. But from what I've read, and I've like tasted the leaf just to see, like, and you can tell, like, I know herbs. If I take a salvia leaf and I touch it on my tongue, it's like, whoa, something's going on there. But when you read the trips of salvia, it's not like all the organic things are top notch. If you read that people taking, psilocybin, mushrooms, it's usually good things. It's like their mind opens up, they have more understanding, even small doses, right? That people just take it to like motivate them, keep them going, not to get a high, not to hallucinate, nothing. Like this is doing good things in my brain. Hey Annie, good to see you. But salvia, and I'm sure some of you know more about this than I do, because I think like in the 90s, because it wasn't a Schedule A drug or whatever, it was easy to get and kids would get it because they could buy it at the pipe shops and stuff. Salvia apparently gives these nightmare hell trips where you're hallucinating, and I've heard, I don't know, but I hear things like salvia gives you trips where, again, it kind of puts your brain outside of time. And people are like, but this isn't good in the case of salvia, because a salvia trip is like you're being sliced up in a meat grinder over and over again for years. And even though it only lasts like 8 minutes, it feels like it's years. And I'm like, whoa, what? And so this is the kind of things I've heard about salvia. Now that doesn't mean it's known to have good effects in terms of also for mental conditions. But people that took, like in the 90s, because young teenagers could get it because it wasn't really restricted, they would get these huge doses of it. And you can read their stories on the internet, and it was not like, oh, I had a happy psychedelic trip. It was scary, scary crap. So yeah, I don't know. I study herbs, and I think our focus should be healing people and understanding the universe more and how we're part of it, and less about can we get high, because we do need to be focused on our purpose. And yeah, there's some YouTubers on this. There's been studies of actual clinical studies done on things like psilocybin, and the results are astounding. It's like, what the heck? How can they possibly be allowed to sell these antidepressants when this exists? Because it's mind-bogglingly good. And down here, yeah, I mean, I bought salvia just off the internet here, and it came in like a 1 kilo bag, but it's the raw herb. It's not some weird like drug shop. Like it's like the way herbs are done here, right? And so I don't know if it's readily available in the States. And from what I've read, you want to be careful with that one because it does pretty scary things. But what all of these do show, as a conservative growing up, it's like, oh, this is all sorcery. It's just all like brings you close to the devil. And I'm not saying we should be out like, oh, let's get high all the time. But if these herbs were created for us to use, and instead we're just ignoring that, and you look at how that's affecting society, yeah, we got it wrong. We got it wrong. Our parents got it wrong. Our churches got it wrong. That's the reality of what we're dealing with here. I'm not saying that I have it all right by any means, because I don't. But we've missed something really big time. And so I get that people get kind of put off by religious stuff, but I think we're missing it with the religious stuff. I think, if you look at being a Christian, it's about loving your neighbor as yourself. And I'm not saying we should never debate theology or the Bible at all, but I think there's way too much emphasis on that because it's easy. It's easy to try and make yourself look intelligent by debating Bible verses and beating each other over the head with them. But do you see the U.S. church loving its neighbor, or any church really? In the large sense, loving its neighbor, loving their neighbor as themselves? What I usually see them doing is promoting division, that they're the only ones that have it figured out. And just, they say, well, you have to believe the Bible. What they really do is rewrite the Bible in whatever way they want, whenever they feel like it. And it changes from week to week. And I've seen this all my life. And yes, the more you study the high-level science, and the scientists love to get off on the Darwinism and all this stuff that like takes away from God. That does happen. But when you get into really high-level science, you start seeing these patterns of like, oh, Like, okay, take this for example. Jesus said, if you had faith as a grain of mustard seed, you would say to this mountain, be picked up and be moved into the sea, and it would be moved. And so they always kind of told us, oh, it's a metaphor. And what is Jesus doing? Raising the dead, turning water to wine. Jesus appeared to understand the universe to the point, and we say, oh, it's faith. Yeah. And then if you actually study how the universe works and laws of attraction and all this kind of stuff, people are like, you have to stop worrying about it and have faith, and you have to see it, and the universe forms around it, is basically what they say, right? And we say, oh, that's mumbo jumbo hippie crap. That's just antichrist hippie crap. And then you look at what Jesus said, and he's like, if you have the faith, the mountain will be moved. And by the way, I'm turning this water to wine. He changed the particle makeup of water to make it wine. Was that science or religion? I don't think there was any difference between science and faith. Science and religion, maybe. Because religion, I think, is little more than another political party. And that's usually how it's used. So yeah. Yeah, it's wild. And we could get into the golden ratio and all this stuff. And look, we like patterns. And we see conspiracies, and sometimes we get over-hyped on them. We get too hung up on one little thing. Don't get hung up on one thing over here and make that everything. Like, remember, if your purpose isn't making the world better, growing yourself, loving other people, helping other people, if you're so distracted, and I see this a lot with like conspiracy people, like, their obsession is flat Earth, but it's like, no, that's a psyop to keep you distracted so you don't focus on the bigger purpose. Make sure that you focus on the bigger purpose and don't just get tripped up on one little thing, I guess, is all I'm saying. It's late. I'm going to go. You guys have a good one. Just some stuff to think about tonight in this small little group we had. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time. Peace.